70s references. Afternoon, everybody. I'm Gil Gross. Good to have you with us. Oh, man. Turning serious. Again, we will, of course, by the way, stay on the Oakland story. And, of course, Wednesday, KGO is all over it. Whether something happens or something doesn't happen, we are totally on top of it. You see 60 Minutes last night? So it had an extended interview with surviving members of Bernie Madoff's family. Andrew, the surviving son, because remember, Mark committed suicide, hanging himself with a dog leash, and Ruth. And what they said is, we didn't know. What they said was, life has been terrible for them. And they weren't talking so much about financial circumstances, although that certainly came up. But Ruth isn't talking to her husband anymore. The surviving son's not talking to the dad anymore. The last name has become either hated or a joke. And there was a certain amount of, hey, come on, show us a little sympathy. Well, have you read any of the stuff online this morning? Here's from Entertainment Weekly. Not normally we go for news analysis, but man, this guy's just like jumping through the computer. It was hard to believe Ruth Madoff on 60 Minutes on a couple of levels. The first is why 60 Minutes had her on the show, even as a craving ratings ploy. It was pretty embarrassing for the news magazine to devote time to the wife of convicted financial advisor Bernie Madoff. And then it goes on. The second level of disbelief lay in Ruth's view of the universe. She actually believed viewers are going to feel some sympathy for her over the 2010 suicide of her son, Mark. And on like that, people hate these people. In some ways, maybe even more than Madoff himself. I'm reading all these things by bloggers, by all this. I want to talk to somebody whose life was actually affected by what happened to Madoff. Ronnie Sue Ambrosino is on the KGO Live line. Hi, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you? Thank you for having me on today. Thank you
for being with us. You were one of his victims.
I was, and I still am. Actually, that's pretty good. I actually was his victim until, the way I feel, December 11, 2008. And from that point on, I've become a victim of our United States government, actually.
In what way?
Well, you know, the SEC, which is a government agency that should be overseeing brokers, was warned about Bernie Madoff on no less than 6 occasions over a 10-year period.
Yep. By that guy in Boston, right?
Yes, Harry Markopoulos and others.
Mm-hmm.
And they chose, and I think it was an active choice, it wasn't negligence, they chose to look the other way. And they allowed this fraud to grow. Had they, 1992 is the first time they had an inkling that there would be a fraud, that there was a fraud going on. And had they acted the way they should be acting as an overseer, this would have been stopped. Most of the victims would not have been invested because it became like a spider web. And the SEC lured people in. They lured people in by their lack of acknowledging the fraud and by their condoning him as a broker and by going to him. They went to him on several occasions to ask his opinion of what they should do with the markets. When the markets crashed, they went to him and said, well, should we shut down? That's a little scary. So they basically lured us in. They allowed this to go on.
Yeah, and Chase, where he was just parking some of the money as it came in and out, never questioned the claims he was making, and yet one bank from Canada that he brought in trying to lure them, and the thing sat down, talked to him, said, well, where's the money go? Where are the records? And he said, I can't show them to you. It's proprietary information. The guy just got up the table, got on a plane, went back to Canada. It was that obvious to them. But did you see the interview last night?
I did. I did.
So there you are as a Madoff victim watching his wife and his son, and you're thinking what?
I'm thinking that we should be on that show instead. I'm thinking that the victims should be telling the story, not of our own devastation. Everybody knows we're devastated. Everybody knows that 90-year-old folks who invested with Madoff have to go back to work, which is sad. Everybody knows that, and it's heartbreaking to me. And I know, as a member of the Madoff Victims Coalition, I know these stories intimately from 400 some odd people. What I wanted to say was that we should be telling the story of the failures, telling the story that every trade confirmation that we received from this SEC regulated broker told me that I was insured from the SIPC. SIPC is like the FDIC in banking.
Right.
And every investor believed that they were protected for up to $500,000 per account. And we have a trustee appointed by SIPC named Irving Picard, who has seen fit to change what Congress created 40 years ago and disallow valid claims.
He is saying that since these returns didn't actually exist, there's no money to divvy up, so you've got to divvy up essentially what people put in, and that means that some people that got money from Madoff as part of the Ponzi scheme, they've got to give it back, which I know has angered them.
That's not exactly.
You tell me. You're in the middle of this. What exactly are they saying?
Okay. SIPC has two roles. One is straightforward. SIPC is a broker-funded organization. So every Wall Street broker who's condoned by the SEC pays into SIPC to ensure to give their investors confidence that if their broker were found to be dishonest, they would be protected.
Right.
Okay, up to $500,000. So the money that SIPC has is separate from the Madoff fund.
So you're feeling ripped off twice here. You're feeling ripped off by the government and the insurance program that should have been there to protect you, and by Madoff.
Absolutely. And you can say 3 times, 4 times, by Irving Picard, who's going after
trustee.
Investors who took money out.
Right.
And he's now asking for that money back. These people on December 11th, 2008, these people went from whatever they felt they had to zero. And then Irving Picard's coming after them and said, oh, by the way, you owe me money that you took out to live on, money that the SEC said was legitimate.
So, Ronnie Sue,
then I feel ripped off by the IRS, who collected my income tax. In my case, I invested for 30 years. He collected income tax. The IRS collected income tax on this money that I now am told, after the fact, doesn't exist.
So they collected taxes on what you declared, the profit you declared, which turns out to be illusory money. There wasn't any money. Okay,
so and the IRS is keeping it.
The what I'm getting out of this, and the little time that we have left here, is that you were watching this last night, but you're not so much mad at Ruth Madoff and Andrew Madoff as you are at the government at this point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The government has perpetuated the fraud. And this is the important part. It's not just about Madoff victims. I just saw today another company went into bankruptcy, and SIPC is coming in to, quote, unquote, become their knight in shining armor. Well, these people aren't going to get their money either. SIPC has notoriously...
This just goes on and on.
It just keeps going on.
Okay. I got to get to traffic. Ronnie Sue Ambrosino, I thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. That was an answer I didn't expect. I thought I was going to get what we're getting on the blogs this morning. I'm seizing with anger. I hate these people. How dare they show any self-pity on national television? She's gone, you know what? For the last 3 years, I've hated the government a lot more than I've hated these people. So I watched them last night, kind of, yeah, whatever. It's the government that didn't protect us is who I hate. Government said, oh, don't worry, we're watching these accounts. Apparently not. Wow. But let me ask you, and the reason I'm asking is, everybody I talked to last night, and everybody who sent me emails, and everybody on my Facebook page was saying, I hate these people. I hate the kid. I don't believe the kid. I believe both the kids knew. I believe Ruth Madoff knew. I despise them. I hate them. And I'm sitting there going, why? First of all, I don't know whether she knew or not, but I don't take for granted that she knew. Frankly, how many businessmen, you know what most I'm sorry, call me if I'm wrong. You know what most businessmen are like or businesswomen with their spouses who are not in the world of business at home? Remember Michael and The Godfather? Kay, don't ever ask me about my business. Now, of course, in that case, his business was killing people, but so you can see his sensitivity, but don't ever ask me about my business. And then he goes, just this one time. And then when he says just this one time, and she says, did you murder? And he lies to her. Did my dad let my mom? And there's no chicanery with my dad. Did I ever see mom sitting down with dad when they were doing the checkbooks and having financial conferences and talking? No. Madoff's kids were running a legitimate business, which legitimately made them millionaires. One of the things we'll never understand about the Madoff case, by the way, is unlike everybody else that's done a Ponzi scheme who was not a millionaire, he was a legitimate millionaire. Former head of NASDAQ. The guy legitimately was already a millionaire. Why he did this extra thing makes no sense at all. Bizarre. Psycho case? Yeah, probably, but he still knew what he was doing was illegal, therefore not mentally ill according to the law, and therefore is in prison exactly where he belongs. But I am reading the blogs and everything this morning, and I hate these people last night. I didn't feel that sorry for them. They're still left with millions, but, you know, I'd still like to have their life except without the lousy name. But did you believe them? When you watch, do you believe they didn't know anything? Do you have any sympathy for them? Do you feel this was an exercise in self-pity that was just ridiculous and shameful? Or you think, nah, they're human? 808-0810. 808-0810. Gil Gross, KGO. Later, boy, talk about putting the shoe on the other foot. Toward the end of the show, we'll talk about Thanksgiving charities. But right now, what do you think about the Madoffs? You believe them? You don't believe them? Why is everybody so pissed off with the wife and the kid? 808-0810. We'll go to your calls in a second into the KGO traffic department. Gil Gross, KGO. Let's go to the phones. I just read something, and it has nothing to do with any of this. I'll get to it in a second. That upset me more than the Madoff thing. But let's take some calls. 808-0810. Joan in San Rafael. Joan, what do you think? Do you believe these people?
Pardon me? Do I believe these people?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I was kind of going with Andrew until he was asked twice how much money he's really worth, and he wouldn't say. That was, you know, that was one thing. And then another one is that they were in the business of trading. And why wouldn't their father have put trades through their company? You know, was he saying that he's doing it himself? I mean, and then how could they not know? And then, and I think this whole thing is really just a book tour. They're out to sell books, and they made a point of saying on 60 Minutes a couple of times that none of the money for this was going to the Madoff family, but it's going to Andrew's fiance. So
right.
I think this whole thing, you know, and Mrs. Madoff clearly had taken off all her jewelry and made a point of her hands being out with no jewels on. It just seemed too staged.
Not buying it. I didn't mind him not saying how much he made. I'm not sure that's anybody's business. He said he's worth millions, and actually his financial record is part of the public court record.
Exactly. So why not just say, you know, yeah, I am worth this, and you know, so the fact that they don't feel badly enough to give back, and there wasn't enough sympathy for the people who lost everything. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I hear you with that. I never know, and by the way, there may have been no sympathy for the people or not enough. We never know, since we see an edited show, if they went on and said 7 times how sympathetic they were and 6 of them were cut out. It's just not something we're going to know. Having edited, obviously, tons of pieces myself, I'm just saying it's possible, although it's also possible they never said anything. Tracy in San Jose. Tracy, what do you think?
You know, I think that what? I believe them. I mean, how many years was he looked into by big Wall Street brainiacs that he pulled the wool over some really, really smart people that really should have been patrolling this whole situation, and they never caught wind of this. And how many years did he get away with this? And yeah, I do. I think he could have definitely have pulled the wool over his family's eyes. You know, the one thing the son said that made a lot of sense, you know, he was born with his father doing this business. He was constantly being told what a brilliant father, what a brilliant financier your father is. Why would he not think anything different?
Yeah, and he was. And, of course, that's the strange part of the story, which we'll never figure out. And the people who have interviewed him haven't figured it out, and the people trying to do psychological things haven't figured it out. Unlike any Ponzi scheme I've ever heard of, this is a guy who is already an honest-to-gosh millionaire. This is not a guy who had to do a Ponzi scheme to get rich. He was legitimately rich when he started this thing. Plus, I'll tell you something else, because with one of his biographers, I went through, not an authorized biography, went through the returns for his fund, and they would have been kind of in the middle of the pack. The only weird thing about them is they returned about the same every month, but in 80-like funds, his finished about 40.
Yeah.
So he could have actually stuck his people's money and not done anything, just stuck it all in one big Vanguard or Fidelity fund, taken their fees, and still had a kind of ripoff that would have been a legal ripoff. It's a weird story from day one.
And I think that they can't be sorry enough. I mean, how there is no apology big enough, long enough that would help some of these people that lost their.
But do you have to
life.
apologize for your dad?
I know. And how bad do they have to feel for him? You know, they cut themselves off from him. So, I mean, I feel bad for them because they are the piranhas.
Yeah, all right. I thank you so much, Tracy. 808-0810. I'm going to add something, though. In fact, maybe it'll be the whole next segment. Because, okay, I really love this person. This person's very cool. Except for Halloween, they're giving out school supplies. Well, here's the thing. They think wait. I'm going to give them their due. I cannot tell you how much I disagree with this. That everybody talks about obesity. Our kids are fat. Our kids are fat. Our kids are fat. And then we've had this holiday. The costumes are cool and all of that. They come to the door, and then you give them candy. Here, you fat little beggars. Kind of like Hansel and Gretel. Here, eat more before I put you in the oven and eat you, or whatever. Because we're all going, our kids, they're eating. Let's go door to door and get more Snickers than the world has ever seen. So they are giving school supplies. The villain in 101 Dalmatians will not be as hated as this house will be tonight. I'm just saying. Let me ask you. And you can still call on the Madoff thing, too. But it's got me, and it's the only day we can talk about this, really. Not only what do you think of that, but what's the damn weirdest thing that you ever got or your kids ever got in Halloween? Something that people gave out, and you went, seriously? On Halloween? Honest to God? I'll tell you a true story from my neighborhood. 808-0810, 808-0810. So I'm throwing that into the mix. Do you think my friend has a point? Or do you think they're just being the Grinch that killed Halloween? 808-0810, Gil Gross, KGO.
Here's a crazy mortgage idea from Cash Call.